sustainable design, sustainability for us isn't just about the planet, it's also about people. When you look at the UN framework for sustainable development goals, there's an equal amount of people-focused metrics as there are about planet metrics. And so, as you know, we have our Goldfinger Academy, which shares our skills in traditional craftsmanship and sustainable design. And so, Katie, I'd love to ask you, what do you think all students should know about sustainable design or about the circular economy? What's the most important thing?
I mean, that's a really big question. I think one of the things that keeps coming up, so I run a masterclass for designer makers who want to work with waste materials, and a lot of them are currently students, so they're doing master's degrees or undergraduate degrees, so I'm sort of seeing what they're getting from their formal education as well as what they're getting from me. I think one of the things that is incredibly important is material literacy. So, 20 years ago, if you were a design student, there were a bunch of materials you needed to get your head around, and then you were good to go. And you probably specialise in a couple of those, so you're fine. Now, there are new sustainable materials being developed, invented, discovered, redeveloped, reimagined, rediscovered. And so this space is moving so fast, and it's so important. 80% of the environmental impact of any object is determined at design stage. So before the object is even made, and I spoke to the person who came up with that statistic, he said it's actually closer to 95, but 80 was what he could prove. And if, designers used to have to understand the materials that they were using from a structural integrity point of view, from a functionality point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, they didn't necessarily have to think about what would happen at the end of that object's life. And I think all of those things are still really important, and designers need to understand this whole swathe of new materials, or kind of mycelium arguably is not a new material, but it's being used in a new way. They need to understand it from all these new materials from all those perspectives, but they also need to understand what that material is going to do in 100 years' time, 200 years' time, 300 years' time. Is it going to biodegrade, or is it going to cause problems in the environment? And it's interesting that one of the makers who's not in the book actually, but was on the podcast, is a company called Skinflint who reclaim vintage lighting, and they specifically take vintage lighting from 1920 to 1970. And I was like, what bookends it? Why 1920 to 1970? 1920 is the advent of mainstream electricity, 1970 is the introduction of plastics. And he said the problem is that people didn't understand that material. So there was a lot of value engineering going on, there was a lot of people trying to bring prices down, and they were using a material they didn't fully understand. There's nothing inherently wrong with plastic. Blood bags are made of plastic, prosthetics, heart valves. Plastic's an incredibly useful material. The problem is we've been using it wrong. Really, really, really wrong, for all the wrong things. I think a water bottle takes on average 2 minutes to drink, and yet that plastic is going to be in the environment for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I would say if I were to have to choose one thing that design education needs to get better at, it would be material literacy.